right, off we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give folks just a minute to file in here. We're really glad you've joined us for our webinar today. For those of you just popping in, we're giving everyone just a minute to get settled, and then we'll begin. All right, we'll go ahead and get started for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar, Career Transitions, Creating a Pathway for Your Next Career. My name is Caroline Johnston. I work in the Office of Alumni Engagement, and I'm so glad you could join us from wherever you are today. This webinar will last around 45 minutes with time at the end for questions. Please feel free as we're underway to type questions that you have into the chat box, and we'll make sure that these are addressed in the same way before time is up. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll be posting it on the career webinar page of VU Connect in the coming days. You may know today's presenter from previous Vanderbilt alumni career events, and I'm excited she's back with us for this webinar. Yanika Daniels, class of 2002, is a certified career coach with over 20 years of experience in the public and private sectors. After 10 years in the tech sector and management consulting, Yanika made a career shift to support more mission-driven organizations in education and nonprofit sectors. Fueling her passion to help individuals achieve their professional goals by cultivating the absolute best leaders, Yanika started her career coaching business in 2016, where she provides thought partnership and career guidance for individuals and teams. I'm excited to now turn this morning's presentation over to Yanika.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, and thank you everyone for joining today. First, I want to thank Vanderbilt Alumni Association Career Services Center for offering this opportunity to come back and talk to you today about career transitions. And so we're going to spend a good 40 minutes or so talking about a pathway to your next career. As mentioned, please feel free to drop in the chat any questions that you have, and we'll make time at the end, but also during the session, just in case there are any questions. All right. So I am going to go to the next slide. So this is me. I am Yanika Daniels, a career coach. And since we're talking about transitions, I'll wait a little bit to later in our conversation to go through my career story. But I have time in the private sector in tech, made a transition to education and nonprofit, made a transition to being a solopreneur, where I do coaching, career coaching and HR strategy. While at Vanderbilt, I was a member of Delta Sigma Theta, the National Society of Black Engineers, Women Engineers, a resident advisor, and in the Black Student Association. So I just mentioned those things because we'll talk about them a little bit later, and how the pathway that you've been on in your own personal journey can help you figure out, hey, what's that next career transition that I need to make? So in today's session, we are going to talk a little bit about defining your strengths and transferable skills. We're going to talk about how do you create a strategy and really think about how do you explore kind of what's next for you. I'll give you a few tips on making a career shift and walk you through my own personal career shift journey. And then we'll talk a little bit about question and answers. And so this might not seem like the standard trajectory of like, how do I make a career shift? I always love for sessions to be practical and actionable. So my hope is that you walk away from today's session with some specific actions that you can take to really think about and move towards what's next for you. So first, we're going to start off with a quick poll, and Carolyn's going to execute the poll. I want to know kind of what statement resonates with you the most. Are you kind of a few years into your career and you're wondering like, what is really next? Maybe you're a little bit seasoned, 10 years or plus in your career, and it's time to do something different. Maybe you're not sure even where to start, or you're curious about, maybe I want to be an entrepreneur. Maybe you like your job, but maybe it's the company that you're in. So tell us which statement resonates with you the most. We'll leave it open for just probably another 20 seconds or so to see where we are. This will also help me get a feel of how can I, the areas that I need to spend maybe a little bit more time on during our presentation. All right. And some of these you might say, hey, I resonate with all of these. It's okay. Choose your top one. All right. And so if we have enough votes, Carolyn, we can go ahead and close the poll and try to see what the results might be. All right. So I'm not sure if you can see them, but I see about 54% of you are saying you're seasoned 10 plus years into your career and wanting to do something different. Okay, that helps me out a lot. 24% of you are saying you're not sure where to start when it comes to finding a new job. About 12% you're curious, maybe about entrepreneurship. And then about 7% are kind of early in your career and just kind of wanting to know what to do next. So thank you so much for participating in that. That helps me a lot kind of understand how to go about our conversation today. All right. So the first thing to really think about is, why do you even want a change? And I like to put this into kind of two categories. And I was going to do like this whole Venn diagram thing, but you really, when you're thinking about a transition and finding kind of the optimal thing for you, it's almost this combination of the right environment and using the right strengths that give you the optimal thing to move into. And so you might be in an environment right now that could be feeling like maybe it's toxic for you. Maybe leadership has changed, or maybe the dynamics are not providing you flexibility that you need. Maybe you have been working remote and they're asking you to come back into the office. Maybe a manager has shifted and you don't like the new manager. Let's be real. People really leave managers sometimes and not the whole company. And so there could be something in your environment that is causing you to feel like this is not quite the place that I really want to be. Sometimes you're in the right environment, and then sometimes it's your skill set, your strengths. Maybe you want to evolve your strengths. Maybe you want to have a challenge now in your career. Maybe you've been feeling a little complacent. Maybe it's that your skills are being undervalued. And so when you're thinking about, hey, why do I really want to change? Maybe it's that, you feel like you can get paid more for your skill set and your strengths than you're currently being paid. So we always want to start off with kind of really thinking through, what is it that's causing you to say, hey, this is the time for a transition or something that I want to do differently. It also means that it might not be that you have to do it now. So some of you may be thinking ahead of time, like, hey, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years. And so you're thinking like, hey, what can I do to get myself in the right position? So we'll cover those things today, but take some time, and that could be their first action. Really assess, why is it that I want a change right now? All right. So here's some questions to get us started. The first that we just talked about, why am I ready for a transition? And is this the right time to transition? So some of us may have taken a little bit of time off of work, and you're like, yes, it's now time for me to transition. Sometimes you have to think also about some of those personal issues or personal things that are happening. So whether you have a family, or what are the obligations and responsibilities that you have? And so is this today, right now, the right transition time? We also have to think about the economy, right? And so the industry that you might be in, it might look a little shaky this year. And so we've already seen some hits take place in tech and some other areas. And so you're saying, Yanika, yes, this is the right time for me. Others of you might think, hey, I need to wait a little bit. So let's ask ourselves that question. The next thing that we want to ask ourselves is, have I put together a plan to start? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. What are some of those key plans that you can do, and who can help you, right? So this is a great start, but also we have to think about who surrounds us, whether it's our family, an accountability partner, who can we reach out to help us through this process? Some other things that we want to talk about today. What are my skills? What are my strengths? What do I even want to do with my skills? And what do I not enjoy doing? It's really important as you're thinking about a transition to assess, what are the things that I don't like to do? Listen, we all went to Vanderbilt. We're all high performers. So myself, if you give me a task to do, I probably am going to do it well. I'm going to do it because I'm going to put effort and I'm going to try, but it might not be something that I actually enjoy doing. So just because you can do something well, take a moment to assess, I can do this well, but does it drain me? Does it make me tired? Do I really even enjoy doing this? An example for me might be Excel documents. I can do an Excel document. I can do calculations. I can do all these things. When I do it, oh my gosh, it makes me tired. It drains me. I procrastinate on it because it's the last thing I want to do. So really think about, hey, what are both my strengths, but also what are the things I'm doing or that I can do well, but it drains me to even do that. We have to kind of take this personal assessment. And then the last thing, and we're going to walk through each of these. How am I telling my own story? How do I account for my gaps or shifts or changes? Many of us who may be seasoned 10 plus years into our career, maybe we've taken a moment off to start a family. Maybe we took some time off just for mental health reasons, or to do something personal, or to take a gap year and say, hey, I want to do something fun for this next year. The way that we talk about this, both in our resume, both to potential employers, that's really important. And so I'm going to cover that a little bit in terms of how you talk about and weave the story for someone else, especially if you're someone who's saying, hey, I actually want to move into a whole different industry that I've never had any experience in. Well, how are you going to convince them, right, that this is actually something that you are perfect for? So I'm glad we're recording because you can always go back and watch this again. So let's talk a little bit about strengths and transferable skills. So this is a quote by Greg Norman: know your strengths and take advantage of them. It's really important that you take time to be able to articulate, hey, what are the top 3 things that I'm really great at? And so there's been philosophies in the past that say, hey, let me build on my weakness, or help me like jump into learning more about the area I'm not so good at. If you're really great at something, let's lean into that. And so we're going to peel that back in a moment. So here's our first action that you can take. Assess your skills. There are many ways you can assess your skills, but there are 3 things that I love to think about as options to really assess your strengths in the workplace. Our first thing that we can do is use an assessment tool. This could be anything from a strengths finder assessment to DISC profile to Myers-Briggs. There are plenty of assessments that you might have already taken in the past for work. Let's go back to those. Let's look at those and let's really understand, what are the things that I am really great at. I am a big proponent of strength finders. It's probably they probably maybe $20 you can take online, and it will tell you kind of what are my top 5 strengths. For me, individualization is a top strength of mine. which goes hand in hand with coaching. So I wonder why, like, oh, I love one-on-one conversations with people, and I can kind of get engrossed in, hey, what are you really thinking about? What is it that you want to do personally? And one of the reasons I love to do that is because it's a strength of mine, individualizing a person, understanding their particular needs. I'm also a learner. That's something that I love to do. And so if you put me in an opportunity that brings challenge, that allows me to learn and research something, that's something that I'm good at and something that I'm going to love. So one way to assess your strengths is to then take an assessment. Another way, if you're like, Yanika, I've taken assessments before, I don't believe in assessments, right? I don't want an assessment to put me in a box. I hear that a lot. The second way that you can assess your strengths, ask people who know you best. So just randomly pick maybe 5 or 6 people who know you, who work with you, and ask those 5 people, hey, what is it that you see as a strength or something that I do really well? And sometimes we don't think people notice, but people who are around us really notice the things that we're really good at. And so take those 5 or 6 people, write down the things that they say and see, hey, what are the trends? What are the things that are coming up over and over again in different aspects of my life that I might be doing well? So it could be a coworker who says, hey, you really do project management really well, or you really keep track of assignments really well, or you really interrogate things that are curious for you. Right. And then you can potentially ask a friend or a spouse, what is it that I do well? And even if your spouse says, hey, you keep the household together really well. Okay, what are the trends and things we're starting to see? Maybe it's problem solving, maybe it's organization, maybe those are the things, the skills that you do really well. So that's the second way you can kind of find out, hey, what are my strengths and what do other people perceive as strengths of mine? The third thing, and this is one of the things that I really love, is take some time and reflect. So think back over your life. Think back, hey, when did I actually make the biggest impact? And when was I the happiest doing it? Like, what brought me joy? And that could be, hey, when I actually gave a speech in high school, and I did a paper in college, and I was able to provide that research and knowledge, and that I was so happy when I did that. And then think back to like my first job. What was it that was so impactful or that you really enjoyed about it? This third option takes a little bit of time to be able to do, but what you're trying to do yourself is go through and reflect about the times where you made an impact. You used your strengths, you used your skills, and you enjoyed doing it. And then go through that and find, hey, what are the themes and what are the through lines? So those are 3 ways that you can assess your strengths. I see something popping up in the chat, so I'm just going to answer it. A quick question about what strength finders have used, or like strength finders is one that I use is like Clifton Strength Finders. There's another one called a DISC profile that helps in the workplace. There are plenty out there, but those are 2 that I just tend to favor. All right. So one of your actions, think about one of these ways where you can assess your strengths. All right. So then we sometimes think about then what then are transferable skills? We hear this a lot. And as soon as we can understand our strengths, understand our skills, transferable skills are really, how do I then take something that I've been doing in one industry or arena and explain it in another industry or arena? So I'm going to give you a little bit of hypothesis. I always like using this. I used it in our last session when we had, I think that was back in October. So if I assess what I'm great at by a skill, so my skill might be problem solving. It might be I can create calm out of chaos. It might be, I'm a great people manager. I love working with people. So if I can take that skill and really understand that skill, then I can articulate that skill in any industry. I can then understand how am I most valuable to an organization or the work that I do. And then I can determine, hey, what do I not want to do anymore? So for instance, when I left private sector tech, so I spent the first 10 years working at Dell Computers, then working at IBM, and I took a total shift into K-12 education and then into coaching. When I think about, well, how do you explain what did you learn in the tech industry and how do you then relate that to education? Well, when I think about the things that I did really well or my strengths in the tech industry, my first thing that I did, I was doing a lot of problem solving, right? I'm not going to talk about, hey, I learned, C++ and I learned the technical aspect of this. And right? That gets really into where that skill was used. But what the skill itself was problem solving. So now when I'm moving over into education and people start to ask me, hey, what is it that you want to do? Well, I'm moving into human resources, but I really want to solve problems for the human resources area in education, right? If I think about some of the times that I was most happiest, I'm really great at if there's chaos happening, I'm the person that's calm. I'm the person that's saying, hey, it's a lot happening, but here's the thing that I think we can do next. So let's really think about transferable skills, more about the skill and less about where you did that skill. And that's how you can translate it into another industry. So I just want you to take one action to think about, hey, what are my skills? How am I talking about that? And what does that look like in another industry? All right. So we're going to shift now to talking about your transition strategy. So there are 4 things that you really need to do to really think about then, how do I go about finding a new job? This is not going to be rocket science, y'all. But what is important is that we actually take the time to do these steps. The thing that's the hardest about finding a job is making the time to do it, especially if you have a job, you're already doing a full-time job, then you got to say, okay, when can I actually make time for finding a new job? And then even if you're in a gap year or you're taking a little bit of time off, there's probably some other priorities happening in your life that's taking up time. And so this has to be a priority for you. So when I say create a plan, the first step is really to identify, when do I have time to devote to finding, exploring, thinking about a new job? And also, when am I best at doing that? It could be that, hey, I work a 9 to 5. And so my best time might be Saturday mornings. I have people sometimes who tell me, oh, I work a 9 to 5, so I can work on this after my job is over. If you've worked 8 hours, 10 hours a day, the last thing that you're going to have energy to do is then to come home and then say, okay, let me think about this new job, right? So think about when you have the most energy. Maybe it's on a Saturday morning or a Sunday. Maybe it's you wake up earlier in the morning and take an hour before you even jump into your regular job to do it. So first, create a plan about when am I going to have time to do it. Designate that time and stick to it. One of the things that I do often is if I have something to do, I will time block it on my calendar so nobody else can fill that time. And so I'm great and at my best in the mornings. So in the morning times, I may block off 8 to 9 a.m. And I might take that time and say, I'm going to take an hour just to go online and see what jobs are out there, right? And so that is a big component of creating your strategy, designating a specific time. Also, what am I going to do in that time? So sometimes we'll get online and we'll just search and search and search for jobs. And so what you want to make sure that you do is say, hey, I'm going to give myself 1 hour. And in this hour, I'm going to find 3 companies that I'm just interested in. And I'm going to research those companies. And at the end of that hour, I'm going to see, hey, what was it that I learned or learned that I didn't want to pursue? So in my hour, my plan might be, I'm going to look at these 3 companies, or I'm going to go look at 3 or 4 job descriptions. And I'm going to take that job description and really go into detail and see, hey, what about this job resonates with me or seems exciting to me? The third thing is to get an accountability partner. This could be anybody who is going to check in with you maybe once a week, maybe once a month, and say, hey, how's it going? You said you were going to take about an hour. Did you actually take that hour? Did you actually this week do that? And if not, why not? Or maybe it's someone who's on this call or someone who's also looking for a new job. It can be overwhelming trying to make time for looking for a new job. And if your job search kind of prolongs longer than a month, maybe 3 months, sometimes you can get in your head as well and feel a little bit tired of like, am I ever going to get a new job? So having an accountability partner to keep you honest with how much time you're actually spending makes a world of difference. The fourth thing, which is almost kind of one of the biggest things and really important, is to utilize your network. And if I'll put a small plug in, if you have not watched my series on networking, which we did in October, make sure you go back and take a look at that. Over 70% of people who find new jobs say that they found those new jobs through someone that they know, right? So let that sink in. Sometimes spending a lot of time passively looking for jobs on job search engines and things like that, that's not the best way. You have to really think about, how do I utilize my network? Who do I know? And how do I talk to them? And so we're going to spend just a little bit more time talking through, how do you utilize your network? Because that is going to be the biggest way to you getting your new role. All right. I see maybe one question in the chat. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Carolyn. I see you've answered that. All right. So we're going to keep going. So utilizing your network or your network web. And we're spending a little bit of time on this just because I said 70% of people find a new job through their network. So what I love to do is to create a networking web. This is an action that might take you 1 hour to do. Sit down and think about, hey, what am I all a part of? Who do I even know? Maybe it's people that you used to work with or currently work with. Maybe it's your school affiliation. So you've come to this webinar through Vanderbilt. Maybe think about your mentors, your classmates, faculty. What organizations are you also a part of? Maybe they're personal organizations. Maybe they're things like maybe a tennis club that you're a part of. Maybe it's the PTA. Maybe. So a lot of times people dismiss the other people around us who might be the key to us getting a new job. Maybe it's social media. I will say, if you're thinking about a job and you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. That is the professional career opportunity, right? The social media network for professionals looking for jobs, trying to find jobs. So you want to ask yourself, and maybe you write this down. I'm thinking about a job. Who are the people that I know? How can I more proactively tap into that? What are the gaps? What are the areas of people that I don't know? Maybe I need to build new professional relationships. Or who are the people who are connectors? We all know that person. Maybe we're that person in our lives who knows a lot of people, right? They are our connectors. So you might be saying, Yanika, okay, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but what does this look like practically? For someone who might be wanting to make an industry shift, and you're like, hey, I've been in tech my whole life. Maybe I've been in education my whole life. And I really want to think about what it might look like to go into healthcare or to be a part of a startup. I'm not sure what that even looks like. My challenge to you would then be, hey, think about your friends. Think about your LinkedIn friends. Think about people on social media. Do a quick search on social media for someone that might be in the arts or that might be working in a startup or that might be in a nonprofit, right? Then you potentially have your start there, right? Reach out to that person and just say, hey, can we have a 30-minute, virtual coffee? Or, hey, the next time I see you at the PTA meeting, I'd love to chat with you for a minute. And what you're doing in this moment is you're utilizing your network to explore, find out, hey, I saw that on LinkedIn that you had a new job or that you're working in the arts. Tell me a little bit about that, right? Sometimes when we say networking, people automatically go to the like, what can you give me or what can I give you? But sometimes our networking is exploratory. We just want to know more because knowing more may then pique our interest into learning a little bit about something that we want to do. And so I will have one quick example of what that looks like for you. And I've used this a few times, but it's probably, one of my best stories of how someone used their network to be able to get a role. One of my clients, and I think I've talked about this before, said her dream company was Peloton. And this was maybe 2 years ago. And we talked a little bit about, well, do you know anybody that works at Peloton? And she said, no. And I said, well, have you told anybody in your network that you want to work at Peloton? And she's like, no. So sometimes we hold these ideas and dreams and we never even express them to the people around us. And so I challenged her to do that. Well, she ended up finding out that her neighbor's father worked at Peloton by just sharing that, hey, I'm on a job search. And excuse me, in that job search, one of my top companies is Peloton. And her neighbor said, oh, my father works at Peloton. Let me connect you. Right. So when you think about who's in your network, it's sharing and understanding from others like, hey, what are you doing at this company? Here's something I think I'm interested in. And that's how we begin to really take a good first step at beginning to find and explore that role that we might want to do. Let me see some quick questions here. So the question is, you quoted 70% of jobs come through your personal network. Do you see this percentage increase as your tenure level increases to more senior roles? I would say absolutely. Well, I don't know that the percentage increases, but I will say the more tenured and senior that you get into senior level roles. I work a lot as also a recruiter for nonprofits. And many people begin to trust people that they know. And so a lot of hires at a senior level will come through a referral, will come through someone that they know. And so I'm not sure that the 70% increases. I don't have that percentage, but I do know the senior level roles, many CEOs, many executive directors that I work with trust people that came through a referral or someone that they know. And that's why networking is really important. Thank you so much for that question, Virginia. All right, so we're going to keep going. And we're going to talk about setting ourselves up for success. So there are 4 steps, and I'm going to just go ahead and reveal all the steps now. That you want to do to set yourself up for success. So you might be at that point where you're saying, okay, I know I want to move into this new career or new field. Yanika, I've done the things of like figuring out where I want to go. I've tapped into my network. I've done a skills assessment. I know what I'm really great at. How do I practically do this? Or you've said, Yanika, I need to set aside time. What do I even do in that time? So I'm going to give you a couple of steps and things to think about. The first is revamp your resume. Maybe dust off and pull that resume out that you haven't looked at in the last 3 to 5 years, or maybe 10 years. Maybe you've been in your role a while and you haven't even had to update your resume. So you want to revamp your resume to ensure it speaks to the new role that you're seeking. And so if the work that you've been doing over the last few years speaks very heavily of your current industry, you want to look at that and think about, hey, how do I focus on the skills? Is everything on this resume talking about sales? And I don't even want a sales job anymore. Is everything on this resume talking about tech? And I don't even want a tech role anymore, right? So we have to be able to prepare our resume in a way where people can see our skills and not get bogged down in the industry, especially if you're looking to transition to something differently. Also, if you're thinking like, hey, I'm ready for an executive role, then does my resume speak to some of the strategic things I would need to do in an executive role? Or are the things on my resume really tactical? So our first step is to kind of take a good assessment and look at our resume and see, how do we now need to revamp, update, and speak to the role that we're moving towards, right? The second thing, if you're transitioning industries, potentially learn the keyword lingo in that industry, where you're like, how do I do that? And so one of the easiest ways to do that is, if I'm looking to move into industry, look at the job description. Look at how they're talking about that job. What are some of the words that they're using? And I say keywords because recruiters search for keywords. If they are saying, hey, I need someone who works with stakeholders, but in your industry, you might call those stakeholders clients or customers, right? These are kind of the key words that we're looking for. What's the lingo that they're using in this new industry? And let me learn that a little bit more. Let me put that into my resume. The third thing that you can do is be a learner. Learn about the industry or do your research. So I put LinkedIn on here because you can go to a company's page and see what they're posting about, see what the videos are about, see if they're having a webinar on something that is of interest to you. By being able to kind of engross yourself in some of the language, doing your research, that makes you a lot more aware of what's important to them. I always also think about, for me, diversity, equity, and inclusion is really important. And so anytime I'm thinking about a new company, I'm going to go to their website. I'm going to look at their leadership team. I'm going to see, hey, is there a diverse leadership team there? What do they believe about inclusion? And I'm going to kind of spend maybe an hour on their website. Remember I said maybe we have that hour in the morning. I'm going to give myself a time limit. I'm only going to spend an hour kind of looking through this company and seeing, hey, do they move higher up on my list, or am I not interested? So you want to be able to begin to do your research on an organization or company. If there are events, attend those events. There might be something online. There might be something in person. I also have people always asking me about volunteering. And if you are saying, hey, Yanika, I actually don't have experience at all in the area that I want to move into, I would then ask you, hey, is there an opportunity for you to volunteer in that industry? Could you potentially be on a board or attend an event or volunteer at an event so that you can learn more about that particular job, that particular industry, and meet people in those opportunities. When I attend a webinar on something that is new to me, I might look at who are the presenters, and then I might reach out to the presenters afterwards on LinkedIn and just say, hey, I saw you in presenting. I would love to connect with you, right? It is a lot easier than it used to be. Social media and even webinars make it a lot easier to be able to engage with people these days. So taking it upon yourself to revamp your resume, learn the keyword lingo in an industry, learn about the company, volunteer or go to in-person events. All of these things will help you learn more about where you're transitioning, talk to more people about that, and that helps set you up for success. All right, I see just a couple of questions. One question I see coming from Renee: how do you use your network when you don't exactly know what you want to do? How do you start the conversation? Where do you start? Great question. So there's two types of networking. One is exploratory. The second type of networking is really targeted. And so when you're in the exploratory phase, which is kind of what I hear you asking, Renee, is I don't really know what I want to do. The first thing that we started off at the beginning of our session today, know what you're good at, Renee. Know that, hey, here are the 3 skills that I know I'm good at. Like, I don't really know what I want to do next, but I do know I'm great at project management. I'm really great at working in teams. And I really love opportunities to learn more or a challenge. So you're coming to the table at least knowing these are the things I'm good at. So you start there. The second thing is then just have a conversation. You're curious. This is the opportunity for you to learn more. It might simply be like with a professor. I haven't talked to you in a while. Do you have 30 minutes to connect? I'd love to learn a little bit more about your pathway, your career story, the things that you're working on today. It might be a conversation with a friend. And hey, we always hang out, but can I talk to you a little bit about like how you got the role that you're in today and what you actually do in that role? So when you're not sure, you have to kind of go on this exploratory journey to then the things that you think are piquing your interest, have a conversation and learn a little bit more about that. And so that's how you begin to use your network. When I network with people, I also never leave the conversation without asking them, is there someone you think I should connect with, right? And so the person that you're talking with, they might not be in a field that you want to be in. As you're learning more about what they're doing, you might think, okay, that's not quite what I want to do. Hey, here are the things that I know I'm good at. Is there anybody in your network that I should connect with? So that's kind of the way that you begin to utilize your network. So great question. I see another question. I'm going to get to our last slide, and then I'll come back in and answer that last question in our Q&A. All right. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was your story. It's really important for you to think about the journey, the path that you've been on, especially if you're a seasoned professional, because you are going to be responsible for making that journey make sense, right? So I will give you an example of my journey. So I graduated in 2002 from Vanderbilt with an electrical engineering degree. When I was at Dell Computers, I actually served in a liaison role where I knew technology and I understood it, and then I could explain it to those who didn't. So I was really in kind of this industrial liaison role, bridging tech and people. I then went and got a grad degree from MIT in supply chain. And I got a degree in supply chain because I really liked solving problems. I wanted to know how things moved from A to B. After that, I then worked at IBM. At IBM, I was a consultant, and I went in and helped organizations figure out and solve problems, become more efficient. After doing that for 10 years in the private sector, I felt like, oh my gosh, I wasn't making an impact. Like I was helping big organizations, but I really wanted to think about my passion for education and how students learn. And so I made a career transition, And I went to work at a school district. In the school district, I worked in HR. And when I worked in HR, it was because I had worked with so many companies about process and technology that I saw that the people aspect was really left behind. And so I said, this next phase of my life, I really want to move into learning about people. And so I took what I learned that 10 years, but then I moved it into people. So for 2 years, I worked in HR, and then I moved to Teach for America and began to do coaching. I did coaching around how do you support your people? How do you work with school districts? And so then after that, I said, I really love this work. I love coaching people. I love thinking about education, nonprofits, and really helping people think about how do they move up the career ladders? How do they maximize their skills and strengths? And so I started my own business after I left TFA. So as I tell people that story, there are themes that start to come up. One, I did a lot of problem solving at Dell, at IBM. I helped organizations solve problems, create efficiencies, work with processes. I then realized in that process that the people aspect was missing, and I loved like coaching, and a skill set of mine is individualization. And I really wanted to spend the next part of my life on people, right? So this is how I'm telling my story. I'm telling this to people who are like, how are you even qualified for this? You've never done this. So you have to own that and really be able to bridge that gap for people. So that last piece is really thinking about, hey, I want to do something different. I want to make a transition. How do I tell that story? What are my skills? What am I really, really good at? Have I made a plan to be able to do that? And then think about, how do I use my network? And what's the story that you're going to tell? And so these are all the first steps to really take and make that transition for your career. All right, so we're going to open it up for questions. I see a couple of them in the chat, and I want to just make sure I don't miss any. So I see one question now from Christina. I have been in banking for 25 years, would like to use my languages, German and Spanish. Also, nearing the end of my career, last 7 to 10 years, what other recommendations do you have? So thank you so much, Christina, for this question. I really love it because one of the things we initially started off talking about was like, why are you transitioning? And some of the things that are really important to you. And so you've already identified that German and Spanish is a skill and something that you want to take into the next field. And then you're also saying that, hey, I'm thinking about the next 7 to 10 years of my life. And so acknowledge where those two things either may be at tension, if at all, or may guide your next decision making. My assumption might be, hey, if I'm thinking about the last 7 to 10 years, I might be also thinking about, hey, an organization that's going to set me up with a great retirement plan, with great benefits, with which might help me as I retire, think about kind of what's next for my life. So as you're thinking about German and Spanish, think about like, hey, who in my network is actually utilizing languages? And what does that look like? Who's teaching languages? Who's translating languages? What are the opportunities where I can actually use language as a skill? What does that even look like? Could it be that? And so that's the kind of curious questions you have to start to think about. Where are the opportunities for me to use my languages as a potential full-time job? And so you can start with Googling if you want jobs that translate or teach or support German or Spanish. You can go to LinkedIn and you can look up for yourself jobs that use languages or translate languages or anything like that. You can think about your network. If you have children or people in education or higher ed, you can ask them like, hey, what are some of the top jobs for languages? And so those are some just quick ways that we've kind of talked about today that involve using your network, doing your own research in the industry, and then really taking some time yourself now that you know the skill to then research yourself and say, hey, what are some jobs? What are some job descriptions and places you can go? There are websites such as like JobScan, Glassdoor, all of these kind of engines that help you like find job descriptions or search titles. And that can actually give you a job description where you can then review that job description and say, this kind of sounds like something I think I'm curious or like, or it totally sounds like something I don't want to do. And so set up some time for you to begin to dig into research into that. Another question that has been submitted is, are there any resources for helping to develop my resume? Looking for formats that are going to help me showcase my skills as I change careers. Great question. There are plenty of opportunities when I think about resumes. I think I mentioned like JobScan. There's another site called Resume Genius. Your own Vanderbilt Career Center are all opportunities to help you look and think about how do you update your resume. One of the things that I always tell people when they are looking at updating their resume is to really think about what you're trying to showcase the most. So there are several types of resume formats, and we could do a whole session on resumes, so I won't spend too much time there. But if you are putting everything in chronological order, that might make sense. If you are trying to showcase a skill set that maybe you haven't used in a while, then you might want to use a resume format that pulls up the skills first. And so really look at some of those websites. I also do kind of resume training and coaching and utilize some of your networks that can help you do that. But again, Resume Genius, JobScan, those are all places where you can look at different templates for resumes. I never encourage you to get somebody else to write your resume. Never do that. If you're going to get a coach or someone like that, they can help you, but you should be the person writing your resume. The last thing that I'll say are there are a lot of flashy resume formats these days. Unless you are in marketing or modeling or something that really requires your resume to use pictures and be flashy, I would steer away from those types of resumes. While they look great, many companies use applicant tracking systems. And so your resume has to get past that system. And if you have pictures and graphics and all these things on your resume, it's not going to read in an applicant tracking system. So unless you're in a field that requires you, like sometimes sales, because they want to, see your picture or see your design, I would steer away from that. All right. Couple of other questions popping in here. Something from KO, expecting my first child this summer, want a more flexible role. How can I prepare now to find a good fit? I would say if you have a little bit of time right now before your child comes, I would do some of the things we talked about. Take an assessment of the skills, the things that you want, the things that are also important to you. So if you want a flexible role, begin to think about like, hey, what are the remote roles? First think about what are my skill sets that I want to use, and then think about what are kind of companies that have like remote type roles that will allow me to use those skill sets. So when you're looking at job descriptions, you can put in like which ones have remote roles. You can also, if you're currently in the job field, think about talking to your employer about, hey, what are the opportunities for more flexible or remote types of roles that might be at your current company or current organization that you haven't even thought about? Another question we have, and we'll take a few more, we have about 5 more minutes. This comes from Sheila, other than telling a long story, what's the best way to explain multiple shifts in careers about every 5 to 6 years? And so honestly, Sheila, that is kind of normal now. If you have gone every like 5 or 6 years, you've taken on a new role or shifted. One of the things that I always say is when you think about when that shift happened, what were you looking for when you left that role, and what were you looking for next? So that's how you talk through the shifts. You don't have to go role by role by role. I sum up sometimes the first 10 years of my life I spent in tech. And the things that I learned in that role were how to implement change in a big organization, how to work with people to both implement systems and implement processes. And when I left, I was looking for a new role that would have a little bit more impact, right? So I don't have to say, oh, I spent 5 years at Dell, and then I went to grad school, and then I spent 5 years at IBM. I can simply say, hey, the first 10 years of my life, I spent in tech using my engineering skills and really understanding processes, right? And then talk about that next shift. And when I left tech, I was looking for XYZ. Great question. A couple of other, repeat the place or chat, the strength. So you can actually look up Nicole Clifton Strength Finders. That's the name of it, Strength Finders. It's by Clifton, or you can look at Gallup Strength Finders. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for putting that in there. I have one more question, and then I think we'll wrap up. In networking, this is from Renee, people often ask to see your resume. If you don't know exactly what direction you want to go, but have a lot of experience, do you have suggestions on what to do to tailor your resume so that it's not overwhelming, confusing for the person you are networking with? Great question, because sometimes people, sometimes you feel the need to like just change up my resume. Sometimes people feel the need to tell you what you need to do to your resume as well. And I will tell you, if you ask 10 different people to look at your resume, you will get 10 different responses. So what I would say, Renee, is to be clear with people on what exactly you're looking for. In terms of, hey, yes, I'm happy to provide you with my resume, but also here are the skills. Here are the things that are important to me as I think about my next job. Or here are the things that I want to use in my next job, right? You want to make sure that people, when they're looking at your resume, that they're not putting you in a box, right? Because what people will try to do is try to interpret that, oh, you've done this, so you must now need X, Y, and Z. So you have to do that interpreting for them. So even if you send your resume over to them, there's a part in the resume that's like the summary or the objective. You can use that part to be able to explain, like, here are my skills, and I'm open to opportunities in XYZ field. Or in your email to them with your resume, you can say, here's a copy of my resume. I'm in the process of revamping it, but here are the skills that I want to let you know that I'm most interested in. So you have to kind of take control and guide that question for them. All right. So we're out of time. I appreciate all the questions. I just want to make sure I leave you with one thing. I do group and individual coaching. I do work specifically on careers for helping those who want to actually transition into social good. So impact roles, corporate social responsibility. I also do leadership development, team building, and culture building. And if you've attended the session today, feel free to book a 20-minute complimentary coaching session with me where we would just talk about, hey, the services that I offer, but maybe what you might need to do next in terms of the things that you're open to doing or how you want to make your transition. So feel free to also find me on LinkedIn. I am at Yanika Daniels and Daniels Solutions on LinkedIn. And feel free to connect with me after this. This also will be posted on the Vanderbilt website. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. I hope you at least found one action that you can take away and implement today so that you can move to your next career transition. So thank you so much, everyone, today, and I'll turn it back over to Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Yanika, for sharing your great advice. And I thought we had such a great conversation. So appreciate everyone who attended for being an active participant as well. I just dropped a link in for a follow-up survey, but want to build on what Yanika just shared. Our team will send out an email to you all a bit later this week that will include a link to this webinar, the recording, as well as this link to her assessment calendar, so you can get connected there. And just know that you can always find additional resources on vuconnect.com/career. We're here to help support you in any way that you need, so please don't hesitate to be in touch. I want to thank everybody for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.